Okay, welcome to a week two presentation for our capstone on product life cycles. This week I'm going to be focusing on marketing strategy tied to the product life cycle as well as the overall product life cycle itself. In addition, we're going to cover phase shifts in the product life cycle and a couple of things that can potentially cause those, as well as what it means to the overall product life cycle. Before we can jump into the actual product life cycle, we first have to address market analysis. When developing a new product, you have to understand first who your customer base is. And then once you understand your customers, you can determine the needs that they have. And those needs can be for new products or improved products. And either way, you're going to essentially go through the same product life cycle. Um, so the first step is to research and develop new ideas tied to the needs of your customer to determine which products or services are needed in the current marketplace. Once a new product design has been determined, there has to be a marketing strategy that's developed. Now, the overall marketing strategy has to have a focus on creating value, and there are a couple of different ways to do that. One means is to develop a high quality or a reputation for a high quality. By doing this, you can introduce a higher price point and it will still hold value because, in spite of the high price, the quality is high to match. Alternatively, you can seek a low price point where the quality expectation will be lower, but again, the value is there because the relative low price point matches the relative low quality. In addition, you have to determine a pricing strategy. So this means that you're either going to be looking into price skimming, where you're looking for initial sales and not a lot of longevity or repeat business in order to essentially generate profits right away. Or alternatively, you can look at penetration pricing. This is a strategy that's going to look more towards long term, where your initial pricing is designed to help generate interest and increase market share. And then profitability comes through long-term additional sales rather than the short-term immediate profits. Whatever the marketing strategy and pricing strategies are, there's going to be a need for some level of dynamic marketing. As the product lifecycle advances through the different stages, the marketing approach has to change to meet the consumers in that particular segment. Uh, in order to meet those needs, you have to understand them. So you have to understand your customer base going back to the market research. In addition to understanding the different market segments, you have to be prepared to adapt to changes in the market, which can stem from different areas such as new and emerging technologies or um, improved or different results tied to various marketing media, such as television ads or radio versus a social marketing or print media, things like that. So now that we've looked at our marketing strategy, we can look at the actual product life cycle. And essentially, a product life cycle is going to have four phases, which are sequentially introduction, and then a growth phase, followed by maturity, and then ultimately decline. Essentially, each of these different phases is marked by a different growth rate as well as a different volume of sales and therefore profitability. This graph represents a standard product life cycle going through the four different phases, and it depicts the volume of sales versus time. So initially, we can see in the introduction we have a low volume of sales, followed by the growth phase where you can see a steadily increasing volume of sales. The maturity phase where you'll have high sales but little growth, and then ultimately decline, which shows the overall declining sales in total. So that shows us a good general overview of a basic product life cycle. We also have to consider the potential for product life cycle phase shifts. So what happens in a phase shift is the expected path of growth, introduction, growth, maturity, and decline will not follow the standard bell curve, but instead shift and perhaps re-enter a growth phase or extend the maturity phase. Um, and these things can be caused by a variety of factors, such as new technology can come out that facilitates distribution of products or improves the products themselves, changing market needs. So if a product is viable but becomes obsolete, that'll affect it. Or if a product is slowly undergoing its inception, but then some type of market factor changes that makes increases the need for the product, then the growth phase can be either expedited or even increased overall. Another factor is product substitution. So a good example of this would be your cell phone technology, smartphones. Each smartphone, say you're looking at, for example, um, an iPhone and an iPhone 4, 5, they're all similar products, but they are substitutes where one of them, the iPhone 4 was replaced essentially by the iPhone 5. That didn't completely stop sales, but it did curb them. But the product itself, the iPhone, had its life cycle extended. So now this graph represents a product life cycle that's undergoing a phase shift. We have the blue line, which is representative of the expected product life cycle. The pre-phase shift section is the solid blue, followed by dotted blue, which is the expected life cycle. But then at the intersection of the lines, we have a phase shift, which would be to follow the example. That's the introduction of an iPhone 5 or an iPhone 6, where the new product undergoes a new growth uh, introduction and growth cycle and has, as a result, a different maturity phase. Now, whether a product undergoes a phase shift or not, there's going to be a need for the marketing plan to be dynamic to an extent. In the case of a standard life cycle, your introduction and growth regions will call for different marketing needs than your maturity phase as well as your decline phase. A situation that has a phase shift, on the other hand, will also undergo those same changes, but in addition may call for the need for changing back and forth of strategies. For example, a product can go through its introduction and growth phases and be reaching maturity. And then when it reaches maturity, it can undergo a phase shift, which will essentially send it back to a growth phase. Because of this, the need can arise to shift from a marketing strategy that addresses that maturity phase back into a strategy that is more well geared to addressing the needs of the growth phase. So we can see that whether there's a phase shift or not, the marketing strategy always has to be ready to adapt and meet the needs of the market at any given time.